Fala pessoal, sejam muito bem-vindos a mais um episódio do Mate with Mates. Daquele nosso modelo, hoje a gente tem uma pessoa bem especial aqui, que a gente se conectou online, acabou fazendo uma ligação no WhatsApp e eu adorei conhecer essa pessoa. Foi indicação da Lívia, da US One também, que eu tô tentando conversar com a Lívia para ela vir, mas tá difícil, mas a gente vai chegar lá. E como sempre, eu vou deixar o pedido para vocês que não nos seguem nas redes sociais, por favor, clica lá no Instagram, no YouTube e no Facebook. A gente está fazendo um trabalho focado em passar valor para as pessoas que estão no Brasil pensando em vir e que já estão aqui também e estão precisando de dicas nos mais determinados assuntos. Hoje é um episódio um pouco diferente, porque é o meu primeiro episódio oficial em inglês. Então, o nosso convidado está aqui já, ele está entendendo um pouco, porque ele tem bastante amigos brasileiros, mas... Então, a partir de agora, eu provavelmente vou só falar em inglês. Então, provavelmente eu vou cometer alguns erros, mas essa é a beleza de falar o segundo idioma, né? A gente pode cometer erros, contanto que a gente passe a mensagem que a gente está pensando em passar. Então... Welcome to the podcast, Adam.
Hey, and well done on your English.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks for having me here, man. Great to be here.
Yeah. So when I talked to Adam the first time, I was thinking about having him here to speak about just English in general, tips, and how to improve your grammar or your skills. But then after that call, I think something changed in me because of your energy, I would say, Adam. And your feedbacks about a couple of things too.
Yeah, it's good. I think what I can offer this podcast is just a bit of a helicopter overview of the industry and what it looks like now and how things have changed and where it's going and student perspective, teacher perspective, the dynamics of industry. So yeah, I'm looking forward to sort of getting through what we had planned. So
yeah, because we both know that. Education is a massive industry in Australia.
Absolutely. I think it's the second or third biggest export market in Australia, education. So it's something that, the politicians have to tread around cautiously as well in terms of policy and what they bring to market. So the things they say, the things they do has a massive effect on confidence and trust in students and also in the overarching industry.
Yes, I agree. Before we start, Adam, we've been talking on the background here. And the podcast name is Mate with Mates, right? This is interesting because when I said to my missus, my wife, the name of the podcast, she's an Australian, right? And she said, "You're going to put mate with mates? That's going to be weird. People are not going to like it." And I said, "No, it's not mate, it's mate." Because I used to call mate chimarrão. This is how we call, right? But to make a little bit short, like everything Australians talk, right? They try to shorten everything.
Well, this is actually interesting because I thought mate was from Argentina. I didn't actually realize it was like southern Brazil as well. So
but it is from Argentina. But as my state, we've got border with Argentina.
Yeah.
So we have a lot of our culture. It's more Argentinian than Brazilian.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, so my missus makes jokes all the time. She said, "You are an Argentinian. You're not a Brazilian."
Who are you?
I said, No, I'm not. so Adam, please try our mate. It's a little bit hot. Just go easy on it.
Okay, no worries.
So
is it one little sip or one big long one or just like...
As you feel.
However I want
no
you?
pressure.
Okay,
Yeah, no pressure. Adam actually has a lot of Brazilian friends, right?
That I do. So, been teaching for a long time now, and I met my first Brazilians properly here in Melbourne through the school system, and some of them are my dear friends now. So, hello to my Brazilian crew.
Good. And it's amazing how, when we've been speaking about that in a podcast, when Brazilians, they are open to know other cultures here, because there are Brazilians, they like hanging around with Brazilians and nothing wrong with that. Yeah. But when we are open, we kind of makes friends like really easy.
Yeah,
right?
I find the Brazilian culture fantastic. I'm not saying that because I'm in front of you. Mm-hmm. I authentically feel that it's a very warm, it's a very open culture. People really say how they feel. They they sort of bounce around with life, and sort of when things happen, they're like, oh, okay, we'll move on. Let's, keep going. I think that's a really cool trait that I've seen from Brazilians over the years. They just sort of ride with whatever, but just the energy and the happiness and the delight that comes from a lot of the people I know is like, wow, cool culture.
Yeah, exactly. Especially depending on the state the person is from, it
totally
changes a little bit too.
Okay, cool.
But Adam, let's start on our subject today.
Sounds good. Yeah.
So I've mentioned you are a teacher, but tell us a little bit more about your teaching, who you are, not just a teacher.
Yeah, certainly. So my background's interesting. I've worn many hats over the years. So I've been teaching English on and off for 16 years, so a long time. Started in 2009, I got qualified. But I've got a big background in business. So I've worked in strategic procurement for many years. I've worked as a product manager in the digital space, building apps and websites with engineers and designers. I've worked for consultancy, fintech. I've had my own startup in IT as well. So, but teaching is something that I always come back to. It's a beautiful thing in that, you could be one of my students, and that's the beautiful part of teaching, that you are working with adults from all around the world who want to, better themselves, who have dreams, desires, and I'm like a little part of that journey as they go through. So some of the most beautiful things actually I've received in my life have come from teaching, like people texting and saying, thank you, you've changed my life. And when you receive a message like that, you're like, not many things can compete with that type of message. So it's like, that's why I keep doing it. So,
I guess I remember my English teachers as soon as I got to Melbourne.
Yeah.
They were fantastic as well. And I wish I had their contact, because I would love to interview them.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, because,
absolutely.
You guys are definitely a big part. When we get here, we are kind of lost, and there you guys go and, give us tips as well. So it's awesome.
Yeah, that's great. It's good to hear. I think a lovely story is recently the lady who trained me to be a teacher, Denise. I caught up with lunch with her. She was at RMIT because I did my training at RMIT worldwide. And I caught up with Denise the other day for lunch, and it was just nice. Like, she was my teacher. She taught me how to teach. And, I think when you go through life, teachers, they leave an indelible impression on you. Like, you just remember people that influence you at different points of your life. And she heavily influenced me, and she's still teaching, and she's still working in the industry, and it was so cool to catch up with her. So try to find your crew, definitely.
Yeah, I'm trying. But the problem is I didn't get their last name. I got all the first name, and I think the school has closed as well during the pandemic. Okay. So it's a shame.
Yeah.
But you guys definitely see a lot of stories and, different backgrounds, different conditions and everything, right?
100%. Like, you see people at their most vulnerable. You see people elated, people who've just got their IELTS score and that's changed their life. You see people who are not in a good mental health state, and I think it's the teacher's role to not only teach but also provide pastoral care, to provide them care and actually take them offline and say, hey, what do you need? This is my city. I was born here in Melbourne, so like, how can we help you? What's happening? Like, what's going on? So yeah, plenty of times where you see people riding the wave. And as we know, when we live overseas, it's a wave the whole time. It's not always good. It's not always bad either. My grandfather had a really lovely saying that was, this too shall pass.
These two shall pass.
So good things pass and bad things pass. Nothing stays the same. So as long as psychologically you have that in your mind, then you can actually arguably deal with anything. So,
Yeah, I remember this is a personal experience I had, Adam. When I was in my 20s, I had an opportunity to go to Italy for work, to do like a training there. Yeah. And that was the first time that I figured out I have to speak English. It's not optional. Because my idea before was I'm an engineer, right?
Yeah.
So I thought, I have to speak English because I'm an engineer.
Yeah.
But then when I got to Italy, I figured out it's much bigger than that, just because of a job. You connect with people, you talk to people. We would be having these conversations just because I speak English, right? And obviously we've got some connections anyway. But that was my first impression. I have to learn English. And then I got here in Melbourne, And then I figured out, oh my God, I was right. Yeah, because, so many friends and stuff like that when I got here. Yeah.
I mean, I've lived overseas a couple of times and spent a lot of time in Spain. And I remember learning Spanish for years here in Melbourne. Also, my first Spanish class was in London when I was living in London. Cool. And then when I went to spend a lot of time in Spain, I was like, oof, I actually don't know how to speak properly.
That's exactly how I feel.
That's all the book stuff. I need to learn the street stuff. All the slang.
Yeah, exactly. And what led you to get into the teaching like international students?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I was surrounded a lot by education when I was young. My mum was a primary school teacher. Okay. So I think a lot of those influences bleed into children. You see a lot, you listen a lot. But it's a funny story. Years ago, I was working in strategic procurement. I was running a really high impact tender process for cardiology for all of Victoria. And I had a feeling there was more in life. In other words, it was a great job and I loved it. But I also had this thing about going overseas and finding myself. And I flew overseas for a week. I flew to Madrid for a week and just sort of, sussed out what was going on over there. And ultimately, spent a bit of time over there thereafter. And it was great. It was a great experience. I think that being a teacher, you really do need to have lived, in my opinion, you really need to have lived overseas to have empathy for the people you're teaching. I don't think you can really be an effective teacher, English teacher, if you haven't been a student in another language abroad, because it's a whole different kettle of fish. Sometimes you feel stupid. Both of us are intelligent adults, right? But you get into situations where people are speaking and you don't understand everything and you're like, am I stupid? Yep. I'm not stupid. Yep. Like I just don't understand the language. And then you just have to keep grinding away and pushing and pushing and pushing. And it does come because I say to my students often, the brain is like a supercomputer. You don't realize how much it's learning until you can actually start using it. And you're like, my brain did all that for me. And now I can actually produce the language, which is pretty cool.
And this is something that I'm really curious about. I talk to my sister about this all the time.
Yeah.
I wonder how many Australians go out of the comfort zone to learn another language. And you guys are born here, you speak English, and that's like something that you guys, most of people take for granted, right? Because you go to Italy, you can get by because you're always going to find a waiter who talk a little bit. Yeah. But if you're born in Brazil and you speak Portuguese, you outside of Brazil, maybe Portugal and then a couple of countries. But I don't know if there is many Australians who speak another language.
It's a great question. English is arguably the global language. Obviously, you've got Mandarin from China and what have you. But I think, a lot of Aussies, as you know, a lot of white Caucasian Australians don't. Obviously, Australia looks very different now than it did 20, 30 years ago, which is awesome. But a lot of white Australian, Caucasian Australians don't because they don't necessarily need to. But what's really funny, I always remark on this with my students, is that Aussies are really bad at learning other languages because they don't understand the mechanics of their own language. So when we go to school, we don't learn grammar. We learn because it's an assumption that we'll just pick it up.
Okay.
So when we talk about present perfect, present simple, past perfect, which is second nature for me as an English teacher, if I turn around to my brother and I say, hey, can you give me a sentence in present simple? He's a smart guy, right? He'll go, what are you talking about?
Okay.
Whereas if I turn to a Brazilian and I say, give me a sentence in present simple, because arguably you've learned that in the schools within your country, and then you can translate that into English as well. So it really depends on, I'm sort of segueing here, but it depends on your schooling and how well a grammar was taught to you is then how well you can really pick up a second language. Australians are not good at learning a second language for that fundamental reason. Okay. Even I remember learning Spanish, it's like presente perfecto and pretérito, and I'm like, what is this?
Okay.
This was before I was a teacher. Yeah. And I'm like, what is this? I don't understand.
And that makes sense because I probably would say that I'm much better in English grammar than in Portuguese grammar. Because, once you start learning a language as an adult, you go to the fundamentals and
you start to dissect it and all that sort of stuff. Exactly. Yeah.
Makes sense.
So I think, I think Australians would do well if they actually got taught grammar like hardcore grammar
Okay.
at school.
Yeah, makes sense. And you mentioned a little bit about the international student life. It's being like a wave, ups and downs and
Yeah,
ups and
totally.
downs. Yeah, and expectations, and realities are really different, right? Because when you get here, you are in your high. Oh my God, I'm in Australia. I can do whatever I want and blah blah. But then you also don't know many people, and you must have seen so many different cases. People who adapt really well or don't.
100%. I'm just thinking because I'm just like, where do I start? Yeah, like I think one of the big ones I continue to see is, for example, I'll take this in different segments. So start with the person themselves. So they have their own expectation about what they can achieve, and when they go overseas, it's often with rose-colored glasses. So they'll think, okay, like it's like going to France. Let's go to France and we can eat baguettes all the time and ride our bicycles with our beret and what have you. It's like, well, you also have to go shopping. You also have to go to the toilet. You also have to make friends, go to the gym, keep healthy, be employed, earn money, have your mental sanity at the same time as speaking your own language, because if you don't speak your own language, you're going to lose the plot, right? So I think that there's expectations around what it is to live overseas, but then there's also the expectation around what it when you get there, what actually happens. So employment's a big one. A lot of people think, let's go to Melbourne and I'll get a job. It's fine. Everything's good, right? It's perfect. No problem. And then people like 6 weeks later, they're like, I still haven't found a job. This is crazy. What's going on? Also, depending on what time of year you come, if you come winter, a lot of the hospitality has they hold on to the people they need. Whereas in summer right now, Melbourne, 16 degrees, first day of summer, lol. It comes back to when you arrive, what your expectations are. So what I actually said to one of my students recently, she's from Turkey, and I said to her, all right, I want to do you a favor. She said, I can't find a job. I said, all right. I said, I want you to hit 10 hospitality venues every single day, and I'll print up 10 of your resumes every single day for you. And after 6 days, she got a job. So it's all about, again, hustle, push. If you get 13 rejections, so be it. If you get 27 rejections, keep pushing. She had 60. She almost had 60 rejections until she actually had her next job. So it's just hustle and push a lot of the time. So yeah.
Yeah, and the main thing is you can't give up, right?
No, exactly.
You have to keep going after, and not annoying people, but I also am a big advocate as well of going and giving your resume in person, especially in hospitality. That's how I got my first job as a dishwasher.
Yep.
So I was in front of a restaurant on Lygon Street, gave the guy, okay, come on, let's
come in. Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's go. Yeah. Because often what happens is, when you do that, the last memory they have. So that when they're looking for people, they will think of the last person that's in their memory. And if you've actually gone in and actually handed your stuff in versus tapping online, if you do that, you're invisible, even though you've submitted it. If you're walking around, hey, like, Felipe, hello, they're like, oh, yeah, that guy from Brazil, he was cool, get him in.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Makes sense. And also we've been talking about the student life, and I remember there is a lot of cultural differences. Especially, I'm from a small town in Brazil, right? So my town is 65,000 inhabitants, which is pretty much the size of the CBD. I think the population of a CBD, right? So when I got here, I had people that I couldn't, it's not polite to touch people. You don't meet people and you give them a kiss in the cheek, things that we Brazilians do.
Totally.
Yeah. And I remember one moment I went out with my English school friends, and we went out of a restaurant, and then there was a Japanese crew, right?
Yeah.
And I was, okay, goodbye. And I was going to give a hug to a girl. My God, it got so awkward.
She had a heart attack.
She was like, she almost froze.
Yeah, very normal. Yeah,
and this is something that you experience every day as a teacher too, right?
Totally. And it's also, there's body language, and you're sort of looking to, it was actually really interesting. One of my old students from Turkey actually taught me, she taught me, because often it's not just me teaching, I'm learning from them as well, obviously every single day. And she was talking one day about low context versus high context cultures. And in high context cultures, Sometimes you just don't need to say anything, and you understand what is to be done or what's actually happening around you. So, for example, in a high context workplace, there may be very little instruction, there may be very little written down, but the people who work there are very established at what they do and credentialed at what they do, so that they just do the job. Low context culture is where everything is explicit, everything is directed, and when you think about Western culture, like America, Australia, everything is low context in terms of communication, right? We say, we'll actually go into detail and we'll try to understand the other person. Like, oh, how are you feeling? Are you not feeling well? And really trying to get into, whereas some cultures, they'll just look at you in a certain way and the other person from the same culture will know exactly what's going on. There's no need to say anything more. So when you've got a mix of high context and low context together, like Japan is a very high context culture, so they don't need that. Things are implicit to them. They're implied a lot of the time. So you've got that aspect. Then you've got the everyday aspect of age and gender and education and what have you. So yeah, I think it's a massive area to cover, and I think like as you mentioned, just generally understanding how other people operate, and also how people are taught. So, for example, in Japan, a lot of their education is through reading and listening and writing and less talking. So Japanese people feel really embarrassed often to speak because they don't want to make a mistake. Any mistakes, right? But as we know, when we're kids, we make mistakes all the time because we have to, and therefore we learn. But it's when you versus Brazilians in general, who I love, they're like very open and very communicative and very like, hey, how's it going? Like, yeah, and very like, hey, and then you sort of pit that versus a traditional Japanese person, and you've got like, whoa, you've got like this unbelievable friction. It's in positive friction, not negative, but it's almost like this attempt to understand one another, and it's cool. It's different.
Yeah, and it's one of the biggest benefits, I think, to come overseas and study, because you learn so much, not just a language, but culture.
Absolutely, yeah. Particularly cultures that don't travel that much, and after their stint, they might just go straight back. So yeah, for them, amazing opportunity to learn and engage and be educated.
Exactly. And throughout your career, you've seen a lot of students succeed here, right?
Absolutely.
And we're going to get to the definition of success after a little bit, because we're going to develop our conversation. But what traits you've seen that the students that, learn and, go after it and hustle, they have in common?
It's a good question. I think there are a lot of layers to this. What often happens when people come to Australia, I think, or overseas in general, but I'll talk about here because it's my experience here teaching, or the majority of my career is here teaching, is people will first of all come to Australia with the focus of study if they come here on a student visa. What then happens, however, is they realise that the cost of living is arguably higher than what they had thought, and then they need to start doing more hours of work, which means what happens is the study then starts to become a second priority and work becomes the first priority. And that in itself can affect, their sleep, their motivation to learn, their diet, and also their attendance at schools, because obviously you've got a body called ASQA, which is like one of the main, the main body that oversees the running of the education sector in Australia. And we'll talk about this a bit later, but they're coming down hard on schools to make sure that the schools are real, that they're not ghost schools where students sign up and they just sign up and they're given the certificates, but no one's ever in class. So when you've got people that prioritize their work over their studies, when they actually came here on a student visa to study, it becomes problematic because then you lose focus, you lose consistency. So that's a big thing you see often, particularly there is an absolute trend where people come here to do a number of weeks, like 20 weeks or 25 weeks in Australia, but beyond that they have no plan. I mean, they've come here all excited, money in the bank, a dream, left their country, start afresh. They finish their 25 weeks and then they're like, okay, what next?
Okay.
And that is problematic as well. So, to your viewers listening today, I would say if you're going to embark on an international journey, also realize that journey ends at some point and you have to recalibrate into something else beyond the course that you had signed up to in the first place. And that happens to everybody. So you either stay or you go home. There's two options.
That's not third option, right?
Yeah, if you go home, that's fine. But if you stay, that's fine. But how are you going to stay? And what does that look like? Is that achievable long term? Have you done your costings about what that does look like within this country? And we can talk more about that later. But I think, they're big questions that come up and need answering, but they're not part of the excitement package when you leave your country. But but that's reality.
Just daily life, right? As everything that we did in Brazil, you have to pay your taxes.
Correct.
Right? You have to go to the doctor if you're sick or something like that. You have to do that here too. And probably it's going to cost a little bit more than it costs in Brazil.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen situations where one of my students from Colombia, his friend was working for a food delivery company and broke her foot and had to deal with that in a system that she didn't really know how to navigate here. Now, those things happen and we need to appreciate that they happen. We can't go overseas with rose-colored glasses and think everything's going to be absolutely perfect all the time. Hopefully nothing ever happens to your health and you are fine. But then at the end of the day, we need to also understand that, there's a reality check at the end of the day as well.
Yeah, it's like when you stay in your country, people
Exactly
don't
right.
have life happens, right?
Yeah, totally right. Exactly.
And it's a big thing.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. And things that keep students to progress, Adam.
Speaking their own language and
Okay.
and living in accommodation with also people from their own language. They're the two biggest things I would say that will limit the progression of language. I think as soon as you're working with people who are native, fantastic. It's the exposure piece. When you go home, if you can organize accommodation with locals or people where you're forced to actually speak the common tongue. So if I go to Paris, for example, I'm going to try not to live with English speakers. I'm going to try to live with French people because if my goal was to actually push my French level, well, why would I live with people from Germany or live with people from Australia? It's sort of, I can understand when people do arrive, they do need that soft bed to sort of go, okay, cool, I need to be at home. But also at the end of the day, if you really want to push, if you really want to achieve this goal, we do need to hustle and push and get uncomfortable, because when we're uncomfortable, that's when we learn the most, as we know generally in life. Like whatever skill you want to learn, you've got to push that boundary a little bit further out, and then happy days.
We have someone here talking about, I can't remember if it was accommodation or that she said to me, was the guy who was ambassador of the study Melbourne, right? So he's an ambassador, he's Brazilian, so he came here to give an interview.
Yeah.
And he said to me something that I found really interesting, that you hanging out with Brazilians, there is nothing wrong with that, because we love each other and
agree.
blah blah.
Yeah.
Okay,
Completely agree with that. Yeah.
but sometimes it's not pushing you back, but it's gonna make a big difference in the future if you don't speak English. And I've known a lot of people here, they came here and they spent 5-6 years here and the English doesn't, progress. Yeah, my English, it got to a point now that I'm kind of stuck. To give the big jump, I probably gonna have to go back to school. But, my wife is an Australian. I work just with an Australians. And I feel the need to go back to school to get to the next level. So imagine if I was just hanging out with Brazilians, that would be a lot of trouble, I think.
Yeah, it's interesting because you do see the same trends with the people that are successful, that they will, they, like my friend Erica. G'day, Erica from Brazil. So hopefully she's watching. Well, I'll send this to Erica anyway at the end. But she's now married to a guy from Australia, and they've just got a little baby. So congratulations again to Erica. But she has Brazilian friends, but also they've got the Australian crew. But over time, I think what you'll do is you will bleed into the local environment over time.
Mm-hmm.
You might start hanging out with people from your own country, which is completely normal because it's new and you want to feel safe. And it's like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? You need food, water, shelter, safety, all this sort of stuff, right? But then after you start to move through those layers, you sort of open up to what else is out there, and people need to get out of that safety, food, water, shelter piece quicker than what they are doing. One of the things I see holding people back from doing that is there are probably more people now coming to Australia with less of a focus than I used to see. So when I was teaching in schools, let's say 6-7 years ago, you'd get people that were here and they're like, I know what I'm here for, I know where I'm going. And however, nowadays there are more people I see coming on their student visa, but with no plan thereafter.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I thought it was kind of the opposite.
No, I think that also comes back to a very layered thing that we'll talk about later, but government policy, surety around where that policy is going. So if you come here, maybe one day government is saying, here is the list of approved professions you can go into, but then that list can change 6 weeks later. And I mean, that's one piece of the pie, but that's one thing that is inconsistent in terms of its listing, and it can result in people questioning the system. Like, is the thing that I want to sign up to going to be there in 6 weeks? And that has changed many times over the years. But we'll talk about that later because I think it's a very complex area that sort of really goes deeper into that question.
Yeah, and I mean, getting a little bit more into that area now, I've got here. I would like to talk to you a little bit about market trends because I remember when I got here, 2018.
Yep.
It was completely different.
7 years, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Nice. Yeah.
I remember my English school. I have friends from every single continent. I've got, people from South America, Colombians, Chileans. I've got Asian friends. I had European friends. And I kind of make friends with everyone because I knew that I wanted to stay here for a long time after that, right?
Yeah.
And I knew a lot of my friends, they would go back, especially the ones who just finished, high education, high school.
Yep.
And then they went back. But my plan was to stay here longer. So I designed a plan and blah, blah. And
but just quickly, you were clear. That was the difference. Your pathway was clear. And I think that's the point I was making before, that there are less people coming in now with that I'm seeing that have that clarity. There are people that come with clarity, of course, but I'm feeling in the ELICOS sector where I work, there's less clarity. And then it's missing with a lot of people, especially young people.
Okay. And that's one thing as well. I came here, I was 28 already.
Okay, and that's different again, yeah. So you get a lot, I'm teaching crew anywhere from 18 all the way up to 60. So you get lots of 23, 24, 25-year-olds less who are like, this is awesome, but what next? Because they haven't thought through the entire process.
Oh, okay. And obviously the cost of coming to Australia now, it's a lot higher than before, right?
It is.
So
yeah.
I would expect that people would come here with a plan already designed back in, in our case in Brazil.
Yeah, and that sort of goes into the question around sort of, the sector and how it's changed. I think a lot of these recent changes have really impacted, if people come here at all. And would you like me to sort of kick off that discussion?
Yeah.
So I've just got a few notes here that I brought with me just because I sort of knew we would probably fall into this area. So as we know, we had COVID-19 smash the world, and Australia had a hard close. So I remember at that particular period of time, I was teaching online. I think I did 1,000 hours online with the school I was with. And people were calling in from their rooms and their beds and wherever, and it was quite confronting as to what was happening. And at the time, we had a Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, who basically said to international people, I'm paraphrasing, but we don't have the infrastructure here for you, so you might as well go home. And I remember a lot of the international crew I was teaching felt very sidelined. Like, in other words, we don't belong here. So the Prime Minister of the country has basically told us to go home. And a lot of people did go home. There's some amazing exceptions. There's an amazing girl from Japan, Haruko, that I used to teach. And she worked at a cafe in Richmond, in Melbourne, and there were like 30 staff, and then they downsized it to like 4 or 5. She retained her role, no government support, no family, and I think she's still here in Melbourne today, hustling and pushing away. So you get those war stories that were incredible. But going back to the mechanics, I've actually got I sort of looked up a few facts around Brazil as well. So, post-pandemic recovery, so we're talking 2020, 2021, 22, there were massive increases in Brazilian commencements 2023 compared to 2022. Over 16,000 additional Brazilians came to Australia in 2023. And Brazil was the 5th largest source country for ELICOS students in 2023. ELICOS being sort of your IELTS, advanced, what have you. And it was the only non-Asian nation in the top 10. So there was a massive Brazilian presence post-COVID. Like, Brazilians were coming in, Colombians were coming in, a whole bunch of different cultures were coming through. But what was interesting is because of that push and that volume push post-COVID, the government actually initiated what was called the 2023 migration strategy, whose purpose was to look at the numbers of immigrants coming into the country and into the education system. Particularly, it was also looking at the immigration effect on housing in Australia, because the narrative of the day was immigrants are taking the houses of Australians, which is pretty poor, right? So to your viewers, the word scapegoat, basically immigrants were treated as a scapegoat. They needed to blame somebody, let's blame the immigrants, right? It was actually really, really bad. And that has cascaded into the narrative today in 2025. So I've just got here, just a few notes. So post-pandemic, there was a huge catch up in people needing to get their registrations through, and everyone was being pushed through the system. But at the same time, there were low departure numbers. So as you might be aware, there was the COVID visa. So a lot of people stayed in Australia with this COVID visa.
Didn't have to study or anything.
Exactly. So people were coming in en masse, and the people that were already here weren't necessarily leaving straight away. They were just here, just doing their thing. There were also, they identified visa hopping loopholes. So people were sort of bouncing between visas, and the system, it wasn't identifying them as you need to go. It was sort of like it was this ever revolving door of visas. There was also identified there was a lack of integrity with some of the institutions in the industry. So there were called shonky ghost schools, where people were signing up to those schools and they were given accreditation from those schools, but they never turned up to class, and the teachers never turned up to class. The school was actually empty. Okay. And education agents, education agents with malicious intention were signing these people up, taking the commission, and no one was doing anything. All right. Bye. So there was that to deal with. Then there's also general everyday skill shortages and economic needs, like where is Australia going, what's happening. And then there was this public and political concern around housing. This was the big one. This is the big one that hasn't been settled yet in the media. So the strategy itself, the actual migration strategy 2023 that we talked about, was the first thing that happened in late 2023, early 2024, was there was an instruction given that visas of lower risk institutions like universities were prioritised over the vet sector and the ELICOS sector. So they were being pushed through, but the ones who were vet and ELICOS directed were given less priority. There was a sudden visa crackdown. and ELICOS only visa grants dropped by 68% compared to December 2022. This is December 2023. So all of a sudden, the government was looking at these visas and starting to just reject them. Obviously, there was a reason behind this, and I'm not having a go at the government. They had come up with a policy. They've come up with agreed procedures and principles to say, okay, if you now apply, if you don't meet this criteria, we're not even going to accept your visa. And there's a new genuine student test. What was really interesting is today, literally the morning of this podcast recording, one of my students from Turkey was talking about her cousin, and his visa application was rejected because he was deemed as a non-genuine student.
Okay.
And he got a whole long letter about what that was, and they actually were transparent around why that was the case. But they basically said, we know you're coming for this period of time, then you're going to go back, but we're not seeing the connection between the English course you're going to do and how that will actually benefit you, given your background and given your current job in Turkey, how that will actually benefit you when you go back. So we think, in other words, you're just trying to get into the country, and then you'll figure it out later. Which they're like, sorry, we're not gonna look at that and accept that. So he was rejected. Talented guy. As articulated by my student, her cousin, great credentials, great guy, but rejected because they thought he was non-genuine. So this is another thing that's in the system at the moment. So on top of that, there's also new score entry-level requirements into ELICOS, into vet sector and into higher education. So things have gone up. Let's say IELTS score 4.5 to 5 or 5.5 to 6. So things are sort of edging up like, well, if you want to come here to control the numbers, we also want to know that you can sort of speak at a certain level. Yeah. The other big things I've got here, the financial and fee barriers. So in May 2024, so May last year, students had to prove access to 29,710 Australian dollars in their bank account for their 12 months of study in Australia. Now, if the study was less time, it would be prorated to 6 months to 3 months, what have you. But you now need 30 grand Australian to come here for a year minimum, right?
And you need 30 grand ready, right?
Yeah, you can't just put it in your bank account 24 hours before. It needs to live there, it needs to survive there, and that's something that people need to know, right? So there's that component. Also, when in terms of visa application fees, they went up from $710 to $1,600 in July 2024, and in July of this year, 2025, they went up from $1,600 to $2,000. Now, if you think about a university student spending 80 grand on their degree, you add an extra $2,000, fine, I'll pay it, right? 82, fine, right? But if you're coming to Australia for 3 months and your course costs 6 grand, and you're asked to pay another 2 grand on top just for the visa, not knowing if that visa is actually going to be successful or not, it may just fail and they take that money. It's not refundable.
No, exactly.
So that's a huge consideration, and it's a factor that has severely affected the ELICOS industry. That there are less and less people arguably now looking at that as a serious ELICOS only course. Now they're looking to have to bundle up ELICOS and vet or whatever it might be to sort of ship them through the system. So there's like a package deal, in which case if it's more money, the $2,000 looks a little bit more digestible in that way. The other thing I've got written down here is because there was a lot of narrative around housing and around immigrants, which was frankly racist, which
it's another level of problem, right?
Yeah. And I think this is disgusting language because I'm white. I'm not from here anyway, right? My ancestry is English and French and what have you. So I always say, any white person, look at your skin. Your ancestors aren't from Australia either. So that's why racism really gets my goat. I think last year when we had our federal election in 2024, the leader of the opposition party at the time, there was a lot of narrative appealing to cost of living concerns, particularly those in regional areas, and young Aussies trying to buy their first home. Again, peddling this narrative around immigration and numbers and what have you. So, and that was part of the death cross that defeated Peter Dutton at the election. There was a lot of factors at play, but one of the factors was he went very hard at the international sector, which, when you look at Australia now, Australia looks more like Brazil than ever before, right? There are children of immigrants everywhere,
exactly,
and it's beautiful to see. Even watching the media yesterday, one of the leader of the National Party was quoted yesterday as saying that we risk Australia importing the hate that permeates in some other parts of the world. Now, when you think about that language, people might view some immigrants as causing problems or not, but this narrative around where we risk importing hate in other countries, that's really stirring that sort of. It's not necessarily the best thing to say, because we know there's beautiful people from all over the world, and there are problems. There are always going to be problems in big cities. Immigrants will cause problems. Local Australians will cause problems. But I think we've got to be careful about peddling some sort of narrative that immigrants are the problem, because that is dangerous. Again, yesterday on television, on the Insiders program, they were talking about the different views currently in politics, the views of some ministers saying we can't have the housing problem blamed on immigrants, other people saying it's an infrastructure problem, other people saying we should have a values test at the border, other people saying we need more migrants, but we need them, how can they be steered into regional areas because we have job availabilities there. But also in the same interview with the leader of, again, the National Party, he mentioned, I quote closely, because this is pretty much the word for word what he said. He said, people are pouring into Sydney, Melbourne and Brisbane, and children are losing hope about he was talking about buying their own home, right? So this is on national television. You can check this. And he said, we need to look at immigration, how we do it and who we bring in. Now he's talking to the mechanics of policy, government policy, but again, very emotive language, like we risk importing hate. Aussie children are losing hope. And it's this sort of emotive language that keeps this debate alive around immigrants and housing and what have you. So what politicians have to be very careful of when they're peddling this narrative is if they go too far, it has electoral consequences, like Peter Dutton felt last year when the Coalition Party was heavily defeated at the election. So they do have to deal with numbers responsibly, but how they do that, I think there's a very fine line with the language that's used and the policies that are put into play. So looking at the sector today, I'm sort of now turning my attention back to the ELICOS sector. A lot of schools have closed. One of my friends was an education manager at a quite a big school in Melbourne. That school shut. Quite a lot of schools have shut, and it started looking at ghost providers. Then we've got numbers that are dropping. Then we've got a lack of confidence in the system. So a lot of people are now like, well, should we just go to Canada, or should we just stay home? Should we not go to Australia anymore? So this is the big thing. This is the big question on what this all looks like. So when ASQA did their started their targeting shonky schools, there were 150 dormant providers were shut down. So there were 150 ghost schools that they identified immediately. But the scary part of this is that qualifications are now being cancelled against the schools that were deemed to be shonky. So if somebody paid X amount of $1,000 to do a early childhood course or what have you, that qualification is now deemed to be invalid, which means the money's gone, no qualification, waste of time and years, arguably, because they've signed up to a school that was not fit for purpose.
And probably they didn't even know, right? Because, we don't know everything, and we trust people.
Correct.
We always prefer to trust people.
And this is where agents have a big part to play. Like education agents need to, and there are some great ones out there, but there are also shonky agents out there, and they need to be responsible in that they're asking to be paid to place a student within a system and a structure, and sometimes they let students down as well. So the system itself needed to be overhauled in terms of the shonkiness, in terms of the school system. But I'd also go as far as saying that, the agent system also needs to be looked at. There are some fantastic agents out there, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
And Livia, g'day Livia,
Yes,
from West
exactly.
One. I've known Livia for forever and a day. She's amazing. But there are other places that have given, not necessarily are giving now, but have given bad advice and have taken money from students, promised them the world, and not produced. And the fact of the matter is that we now see this in play. So to answer your question really about what does the lay of the land look like in 2025, complex answer. And if you sort of replay my last 10 minutes, it gives you a bit of a snapshot on what that really looks like.
And then from someone from outside, like myself, right? I got involved in understand the politics a little bit more now, especially because of my wife. She's a tax agent, so she's always like paying attention what's happening, so on. And to me, it feels like the people are lost. The people that are leading this country, I'm not talking about X, Y, and Z, but it feels like there is no kind of plan, right? And that's scary because in Brazil, we know that things are a mess, right? And we know, and I thought, maybe Australia is a little bit different, but it doesn't seem too different, to be honest.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think there's a lot of very senior ministers in the Albanese government. I think, look, personally, they're doing a pretty reasonable job. But I think on the other side of the fence, there's been, with Peter Dutton leaving the coalition party, the opposition, the coalition is really going deep to identify who they are. And there's some people calling them a party that is going to be irrelevant in the coming years. Now, that's not necessarily true yet, but they have lost major numbers in the last election. They're trying to recalibrate their position. But what's a little bit scary is one of the first announcements they came out with in their recalibration after their net zero announcement was immigration. Immigration numbers, and there it is again. So what messages are we sending to your beautiful families in Brazil to say you're welcome here? Yeah. When the narrative is continually, we need to look at immigration numbers. We need to look at immigration. We need to cut the numbers. We need to gut the numbers. And you're like, well, do we? I mean, I know a lot of great people doing amazing work that some Australians would not necessarily do, sweeping the streets and working,
taking
hospitality
care of the
shifts.
elderly. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a lot of great work above and beyond that type of work that obviously immigrants do. And, a lot of my immigrant friends, from Poland and from Argentina and from a whole range of countries, are doing some amazing work in this country now. But they also came and they had to start somewhere.
Exactly.
But don't judge them on what they're on the pathway when you don't necessarily understand the pathway yourself. And politicians are, they're doing their best to understand the situation, but they're not on the ground. They don't necessarily actually understand the pain points, the needs and the desires of the different people in the jigsaw.
And would you say that it's a lot harder now than it was before to design a clear path to stay here? Because, there is people, they are like awesome engineer back home, 10 years living in Brazil, and let's go abroad and do something to work as an engineer in Australia. And it's not that it was easy before, but I think it's getting a lot worse by the minute.
Yeah, I think it comes back to that question of clarity upon arrival. Like, what are you here for? And I think some people, like I say, come here to start afresh. Fantastic. But also, where does that lead to? We do require skilled people here. We have a shortage of software engineers and structural whatever. One of my friends, Doug, he's from Curitiba. G'day, Doug.
Oh, Curitiba.
And he's an architect, and he's been working as an architect for years now in Australia. So I know Brazilians who are credentialed, smart, fully employed here, respected here. So I think it comes back to the person. As we said before, sometimes it's the wave. If the wave gets too much, people are like, I'm out. But how bad do you want it? I think that's the question. How badly do you want it? If you don't want it that much, you're not going to get it. But if you want it, anything's possible. So I really wanted to be an English teacher 16 years ago. I'm still teaching because I wanted it. I wanted it and I wanted it and I pushed and I got it. It's like anything in life. You just have to want. If you're hungry enough, anything's possible.
We've been talking a little bit about, a broad view from the school system, like the studying system in Australia. And I don't think we can talk about the future of how the education is going to be without mentioning AI, right?
True.
I'm passionate about AI. Yeah. I learn every day. I go play with apps every day. And I know that's a little bit of a broad answer, but how do you think the school system, not just for international students, but in general, are preparing for this big wave that is coming?
I think a lot of people still don't know how to deal with it. I think, number one, I agree with you. It's amazing. First of all, it is incredible in terms of the help it can give. I mean, gone are the days where a child will go home, their parents maybe are absent, they don't know how to do their maths homework. They can actually now go into Claude, ChatGPT, Gemini and go, help me work out this equation. Take a picture of it. Incredible. I would have loved to have had this when I was a kid. I did okay at mathematics, but I would have liked to have had some extra, AI help. I think what's interesting now, particularly when it comes to languages, is if we are assessing students' work outside of the examination environment, it's very difficult to tell what they have produced. And we can't turn around and say, you didn't produce that, because that would be accusationary, which wouldn't be healthy. I think it was very funny. Probably 6 months ago, I was teaching a class and we were writing we actually produced a magazine, and all the articles were written by all the guys, and everyone had to work up through a draft system, so I could actually see that they were doing the work. But one of the guys at the end gave me his piece, and I hadn't seen him do any drafts, and he said, here's my work. And I started reading it. I said, you didn't produce this. And his response was very interesting. He said, Adam, I wrote it in my language, and then I just got AI to translate what I had written. So he had written it, but not turned the Spanish into English on his own, but he had written it. So at what point do you say you haven't written it when in fact you can write it in your own language? Are we saying that you don't have the skill to write, or are we saying you don't yet have the skill to write in English? I guess it's like a calculator, right? So do we judge people because we use a calculator now? No. If I say to you, what's 132 times 42? I don't know. I'm going to I could probably work it out with long division, whatever, long exactly. Whatever. Yeah. But no one does that, right? Everyone just goes, Is that cheating? Well, you could argue the same with AI, right? So if we know what the outcome is supposed to be, a la 132 times 22, I know what the outcome should be. It's going to be a number that's going to be quite high. You can also argue that if the person knows what good output is that the test of language and I guess this has become quite a blurred space.
Because as I always say to my sister, whoever make a statement, oh, AI is this, AI is that, is wrong. Because no one has any idea yet. Yeah. Apart from the guys that are running the show, probably they don't even know what it is, right? But I figured this is like Instagram when we start doing Instagram back in 2009 or something. How is Instagram today compared to the Instagram in 2009? Right? It's a completely different thing.
Very different.
And AI, I would say it's bigger than Instagram. So Absolutely. We don't even know what this thing is going.
Yeah, and I think from just the education perspective, like one of my neighbours is actually like a professor at and she's connected to a whole bunch of universities, and she was having a meeting the other day with some people online about how they're approaching AI in their university system. So, they're meeting on it. So that meeting was 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago. So, there's this constant, what are we doing? How are we doing it? But I think to any teacher or any institution watching this video is, yes, you can put systems in place, but unless you actually have some sort of draft system where you're seeing the work being produced somehow, you can't guarantee that that's their own. Except in an exam situation where you give them a pen and you say write, or you give them a computer, a laptop, and say write, just write, type, whatever, produce.
Yeah,
live.
Exactly. That you can't do that, right? It's it's a big thing. And apart from the schooling system, the education system, people are scared of losing jobs, right? And when the machines got invented in an industrial revolution, is that right?
Yeah, perfect.
And a lot of people they went to the factories because they worked in farms before, and then the tractor got invented, and then people. That's all right.
Keep going.
Yeah. So the people lost their jobs and stuff like that, but humans adapt, right? We always
Correct.
find a solution, but there is a lot of people that are like scared of losing jobs and stuff like that. And I would say what would take 10 people to do, maybe now it takes 2 or 1 or maybe, so people are scared of losing their jobs, and there is a lot of talk online. And even for teachers, how do you think the future is going to look like? I'm not talking about 20 years, Adam, because that's going to be a pretty wild guess, right? But in the next 2-3 years.
Yeah, look, it's a good question. I think it comes back to government policy, doesn't it?
Oh.
So what is the institution accredited to do? It's like, for me, it's like self-driving vehicles. You've got to have government policy to be able to initiate that, to roll that out en masse. So if you don't have the right government policy suite sort of environment in place, you can't do that. It would be illegal. Similar to teaching, I think it will remain as long as governments of the day see the job as relevant and people holding that role. However, even in today's classes, for example, I might teach a new piece of discourse, vocabulary, and say to my class, who is a combination of Turkey, Thailand, Venezuela, Brazil, Colombia, France, and say, does everyone actually understand that? And some people might go, oh, I'm not sure. And I say, okay, I'll just put it into ChatGPT and we'll translate it across 6 languages. And then you get people going, okay. And we're like, okay, are we good? We can move on? And it was like, yeah, okay, cool. Let's keep going. So it has awesome application like that. So whether you're writing essays, you're teaching discourse, for example, I right now I focus on advanced level English, IELTS exam preparation. And at that level, you're dealing with pretty hardcore grammar, hardcore vocabulary. And we're like, okay, so there's going to be a lot of stuff here, phrasal verbs, a lot of things that we're going to need to get across pretty fast. And some, I'm constantly using ChatGPT. It's open all the time in my classes. Mm-hmm. You've got to be careful not to go too far across into it, because then you're seen as maybe a teacher who just lives in that space. I use it sparingly. So I'll teach the class, and if you can smell in the room if something is not understood, you can tell instantaneously, right? And you can say, okay, let's just stop, let's just type it in, see it, and then everyone's like, and you go, yeah, okay, cool, we're good. Okay, back again.
Move on. Exactly.
So in that way, it's fantastic. But yeah, we've got to be careful, because people also want value. They want value from humans. So for example, if you were to write an essay and give it to me, and I was to grade the essay, I could say to you, hey, Felipe, I'll read it. I'll give you some feedback, and then I'll give it to you. And you'll go like, oh, he wrote on it, right? Versus I could train an AI agent within Claude in projects, scan your piece of writing, train an agent to mark it, print it off, and then give it back to you. And you go, did he read it? Did he read it at all?
Exactly. Or just use an AI.
Exactly. And this is where we've got to be really careful, because it can also be used in a way that increases productivity, but you lose the human touch and interaction and rapport with your own students, because they're like, he's for example, like he's not investing the time that I would like him to invest in my writing. Even though I might read what the AI produces and I might change it, I might correct it, it still comes across as lacking the human touch.
Yeah.
And I think we have to be mindful and careful in that space, particularly with education.
Yeah, and as I said to you before, we're going to Brazil in 1 week. I'm probably going to be in Brazil when this podcast goes on air. And my wife, obviously, she's learning Portuguese. She's speaking less than she's listening to. So her listen is like good, really good. I have to be, a little bit slower in what I say, but she can understand a lot. And she bought some meta glasses to go to Brazil, right? Because my parents, they don't speak English. So we tried the other day, and I was talking to her in Portuguese, and I was following like a good pace and trying to speak properly. It works perfectly. She was like, oh, okay. Because I could hear on the background what the glasses were saying.
That's incredible.
We could have a conversation, me speaking Portuguese and she speaking, she understanding everything.
It's a really interesting point because we will get to a point where if all of that becomes affordable and everybody on the planet arguably could have access to it, the question then is humans still are curious? The human species, we are curious people, we're curious animals. And we will want to learn. We don't not want to learn because we've got tech. So yes, I might be able to go to Brazil in the future and I might have my glasses. But if I marry a Brazilian, am I going to put my glasses on and say, hey, let's now talk? And she'll be like, what are you talking about? This is mental, right? So
yeah. And obviously, this is something that we Brazilians have a lot. It's if you look at me and you find out that I'm from Brazil and you say to me, bom dia, which is good morning in Portuguese, you own me, you're right? I do, like, I really appreciate, I really respect you because you went out of your way to learn 2 words in Portuguese.
Yeah, nice.
And just the fact that you don't say hola, ¿qué tal? It's a big victory because we don't speak Spanish, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
So nothing is going to change the human factor, as you said, because when you get out of your comfort zone and you go and you learn language, you show a sign of respect that, it's never known before, right?
You've taken the time. You've taken the time.
Yeah.
And especially, it's the same as like I said before, if I married a Brazilian and then you go meet your wife's parents and then you have to put your glasses on, like it's a bit of a cop out. Like you want to be able to actually go, hey, like blah blah blah, like how are you, and just basic sort of life skills, life phrases.
Even the accent is the beauty of
Totally,
speaking
right?
another language.
Totally, yeah.
And this is funny because we had people here saying that don't wait until your English is perfect because it will never be, right? As long as you can communicate and send your message, you are good. And I think that our accent is our strength.
Access. I mean, everyone's exotic overseas, and I think it's good to not lose who you are.
Exactly.
Like I'm an Aussie. If I go live in Curitiba or São Paulo for like 20 years, cool. But I'll probably still have an Aussie accent, right? Yeah. So be it. Who cares, right? Because I'm Australian. Well, it's fine. Yeah. If as long as I can speak Portuguese and hang out and you get to know who I am and I get to know you guys, well, that's great. But I think like we can't change who we are and we shouldn't try either. Like we should celebrate that.
Exactly. Yeah. Because Australia, it's you go outside, there's people from every single country, right?
Exactly. This is the thing. Like it's changing by the day, which is cool, which is really nice. Like I said, I think we're probably three generations behind Brazil in terms of the societal mix and where people are from and their origins and their ethnicities. And like I said before, like my background is French, German, English, Scottish, Welsh. So that's from generations gone by. Like I'm probably 3rd generation, 4th generation Australian.
Born in Australia.
Yeah. So my parents were born in Australia. My grandparents were born in Australia. But then beyond that, it starts to shift out. But so like ultimately we're all, like I said before, anyone with white skin in this country is an immigrant. Yeah. Or it comes from an immigrant ancestry.
Yeah. That's true. Let's change the subject a little bit, Adam, if you don't mind. I would like to talk about Ben Scorecast a little bit now. Yep. Yeah, I think it's a passion of yours.
Yeah, it is. So like during lockdown, I created a YouTube channel to help IELTS test takers predominantly attack the writing component of the test, because I've taught IELTS exam preparation for over 10 years, and one of the things I've seen mostly is people really struggle when it comes to writing. It's one skill that's not practiced. So we're doing this right now. We're speaking English, what have you. I can give you a book, you can read it, no worries, listen. But if I give you a document and say, can you write a response against this? It's a skill that's not practiced. And it's not practiced throughout generally. I mean, like when you go to a school like an ELICOS, school, intermediate, upper intermediate, what have you, they do write, but it's also sort of small passages. But when people hit IELTS, it's different. They're doing 250 pieces of writing of 250 words, analysing, for example, should zoos stay open? Why not? And you're like, no one's ever asked me that question before. And I've never thought about that question before.
Yeah.
Should zoos stay open? Well, let's discuss it. So then, the channel looks at deconstructing, essay topics, questions, and strategy on how to approach.
Because there is a strategy for the test as well, right? It's not just a simple test.
Yeah, absolutely. And all facets of the test have a strategy, whether, be it listening, how do you approach the listening test, or the reading, or the speaking? Because really when you think about any language, writing and speaking are production skills. You're producing something, whereas in listening and reading, you're not. So it's really hard to teach reading and listening, where it's actually very easy to teach speaking and writing.
Oh, okay. I thought it was kind of speaking was a little bit harder to do than listening, but...
Oh, no. I guess what I meant, sorry, that was coming from a teacher perspective. So it's easier to teach speaking than listening.
Okay.
I can't get in your head. I could try, but I won't.
Okay. And obviously all the pressure, because usually when people go to do a test like that, right, any of the English tests, IELTS, TAFE, or whatever. It's a TAFE? No, it's not TAFE.
TOEFL?
PT.
Yeah. Yep.
So there is time, and you probably need to reach a sort of point in that blah, blah, blah. So there is a lot of pressure as well, right?
A lot of pressure. And as I said before, when we're talking about the mechanics of the industry, when people are under pressure to deliver, there's cost against this. There's, I've told people where they're saying like, Adam, I need my score within 2 weeks, or I've got to go back to my country. Ooh. So that's the other thing I would say to people watching this as well is, if you've got a pathway that's quite clear in your mind, don't wait to the last minute to prepare for something, right? So if you know you're going to go in a certain direction, and you have to sit the PTE exam, the Pearson exam, or the IELTS exam, get the right advice from an a migration agent, start early, start a year out. Start preparing with a year's time. Don't start 2 weeks before. Nothing changes in 2 weeks generally. Yeah. Even a month, if you start studying for the IELTS test with a month, unless you're a very good learner and you can retain information and you can reproduce that information quite easily, you're going to struggle. So, a lot of people leave it to the last minute, because that's the thing. A lot of people are unclear about what they are going to do. Then they make a decision at the final moment and then learn what the requirements are, and then think, oh my God, I now have to do IELTS. Didn't even know. What is the test? Don't even know anything about the test.
Yeah, and I think this is, it comes down to, it's pretty similar to sports, right? I'm a triathlete, so swim, back, run. So when I go on competition, it's nothing new for me. It's nothing that I haven't done like 100 of times before, right? So if you can afford to do a test before, to do every 3 months, every 6 months a test, why not, right?
Exactly.
Because when the day comes, you're going to be ready for it, right? It's pretty much like applying for a job and getting no, or going on interviews. Maybe you go on interviews because you're just practicing. Because when you get to that job that you really want, you've done 100 interviews before.
Then you just go, exactly. No, you're spot on. And it's all about practice, familiarization. And I've had comments before in my class where, for example, I've taught combined classes like advanced and IELTS together, and some of the advanced guys are like, oh, can we do some different writing? Because I'm not sure this is of real value. But I'm like, hey, and this is to a 19-year-old or a 20-year-old. I'm like, dude, if you want to go to university, any type of formal study in the future, you're gonna have to write, and you're gonna have to need to know how to put forward your arguments and how to structure those sentences and what have you. So It's all good. And if anything, when you prepare, for example, and write essays academically, the grammar and the vocabulary are pretty intense, and you learn a lot. So often when I'm teaching writing classes, we'll go over 30 new words in a day.
A day?
Yeah, and that's sort of normal. Yeah, because if you're talking about, zoos, for example, like we said before, like you're talking about habitats, enclosures, domestic wildlife, flora, fauna, poachers, breeding programs, all this sort of stuff where you're like, I know that, but I don't know that, I don't know that, don't know that. And then you sort of piece it together, and you can sometimes hit, depends on the person's level, but you can sometimes hit 30 words in a day, 30 new words that you then have to try to retain and see that in context. And, that's advanced English. That's what it is, and IELTS is essentially advanced. People normally in the LA course system, people who have finished intermediate can go on to study IELTS, which means in the same class you can have people who are very advanced and people who have just finished intermediate. That's where it can be a real struggle to teach an IELTS class. But my method is to teach everyone at band 9, and people just automatically push up. They have to. They've got no choice.
Yeah, you have to, right?
Yeah.
And this is interesting because I think it has a connection as well in what you do, like in your job, for example, because this is really interesting. When I start cycling in Australia. I didn't cycle at all in Brazil.
Wow. Cool.
So I don't know any bike parts in Portuguese.
Interesting.
I know everything in English because I work as a salesman in a bike shop as well for 2 years.
There you go.
So when you say about, gears, shifters, this and that, I don't even know how to speak in Portuguese these things.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And also it's not a priority for you. So you're not going to learn it because that's just taking up space for more English words that you could learn.
Yeah.
I remember I'm sort of segueing for a moment, but one really funny fact I remember when I was overseas for long periods of time is that you start to forget your own language. And I never thought that would happen. So to your Brazilian viewers, if you come to Australia in the future, it's very interesting what the brain does. It tries to time, space save, and it will start to push the Portuguese away and just, so there's more space for English.
Mm-hmm.
Then you'll go to speak in Portuguese and you're like, I can't remember the words.
Yeah, and my mom thinks like, you're losing your Portuguese. You don't know how to speak in Portuguese anymore. And she'll be not offended, but she'll be like, shut up, just speak Portuguese. But sometimes the words,
it's gone. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. It's good to hear this from a teacher perspective.
It's okay, you're normal.
I'm not going crazy. I'm loco. And you still doing videos and producing content like frequently and
stuff. Well, it's funny
like
because
that.
I did produce a lot of content sort of a bunch of years ago, and then I've sort of deprioritized it, but I would like to actually reprioritize it because I'm still teaching, and I think there's a lot of value in keeping on pushing that content out. So anyone that goes on the Band Schoolcast channel, you'll see sort of 10, 12, 13 videos that are on there at the moment. Those themselves create a lot of value, but I'd like to obviously do more.
Yeah, I'm going to put the link on the Band School on the description of the video.
Cool.
And go from there. You mentioned before that teaching is also learning, right? And I believe that too. I am a big believer because it's a funny thing, but I used to dance in Brazil.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I danced for 10, 15 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, 20 years, something like that. It's a traditional dance from my state, which is the south of Brazil, right? And I used to teach the little kids too.
Phenomenal.
And it was my first experience as teaching anything, and it was awesome, right? Sometimes I would just enjoy more than dance itself, right? And I don't know if you can mention something that you learned that from your students or any situation that that's interesting. I mean, you have many cases. It's probably hard to go back in memory now.
Yeah, maybe just the case I was mentioning before about the high context, low context cultures. Because my student from Turkey was very she was into studying psychology and what have you. It was just really interesting to learn about that from her. I think if anything, it's not necessarily facts that you learn. It's more you learn through observation. You learn about culture through observation. So teaching, a funny story. I remember going around the class one day, getting everyone to introduce themselves, and I go to who I thought was a Japanese guy, and I said, "Oh, hello," and he said, "Hey, my name's Kyoji. I'm from Brazil." And I'm like, "Dude, amazing!" And I don't think I'd actually met a Japanese Brazilian person until I met Kyoji. And Kyoji, if you're watching this, from memory, Kyoji is an architect, and he's still living in Melbourne as well. So that was many years ago. It's you just learn. I mean, I didn't realize that Brazil had such a massive Japanese population.
It's the biggest one outside of Japan, I think.
And I don't think many people actually know that, to be honest, mate. I think you need to probably meet somebody from there to go, oh, okay, cool. But I hadn't met anyone before Kyoji. And for him to, I loved how he introduced himself. You think like maybe traditional Japanese, like hello, and he's like, hey, I'm Kyoji
Really
from
like
Brazil, and I'm like, dude, you're rocking, man.
Really
awesome guy. So no, I think just every culture you teach, whether it's people from Russia, people from Poland, from Korea, all the way through to Greece, to Italy, Uzbekistan. Like I've taught people from most countries in the world, and it's beautiful. It's a beautiful thing to also see people work together, to see them learning from their counterparts, their classmates. I think my record is 18 people in a class, but from 13 countries.
Wow.
13 countries represented in 18 people. That's my record.
And that's super nice because,
awesome.
you got people. And one thing as well probably most of people that are listening to us now, they've been to an English school here, but it's awesome that they don't like you speaking your own language, right? When you have another Brazilian in the classroom, and it's really rude if you speak Portuguese in the classroom because the other people, they don't know what's going on, right? You could be talking about someone else. So it's really interesting. They have like signs on the walls, on the corridor, don't
English
speak.
only zone.
English only zone, exactly.
Totally, yeah. And I think I understand that people do need to speak their own language, but it's also, if you think about you're at a school, like imagine that you and I go to France to study French, and we go to a school in Paris, and there's a whole table of people from, for example, Korea speaking Korean, and we're like,
what's going on?
We won't understand, first of all, anything. There's no opportunity to connect with the guys from Korea. But if everyone was speaking French at the table, we'd go down and go, hey, like, bonjour, ça va? Like, we start to actually speak French, and then there's an opportunity to create those bonds. And that's probably the fundamental reason why it's done. It's not to be bombastic. It's don't speak Portuguese. It's like, hey, think of the Korean guy at the end of the table who is actually on his own. Yeah, he doesn't understand anything.
Exactly. And just as you said before, the visa fee is $2,000. So you're paying $2,000 to get to a school and speak Portuguese. Stay home.
Correct.
Right? So it's a lot cheaper.
Why are you there? That's the same question we said before. Like,
exactly.
Why are you doing this?
Yeah, it's really funny. If someone is arriving in Australia tomorrow, for example, Adam, to study English, I mean, we've covered a lot in this podcast, right? But do you have any advice, like, be careful, do this, or try to do that? Or?
Just enjoy the ride, I think, is what I'd say. Like, whoever, I think whenever we make change, there's beauty in that. There's going to be struggles. I think it's knowing it's that this too shall pass attitude. It's like when you come here, you're going to have some amazing moments, but you'll also have some down moments, and that's okay. That's normal. It's a normal thing. But I think just enjoy the ride, enjoy the discovery. And like we were talking before about learning, plenty of Brazilians have said to me that obviously in parts of your country it's difficult to pull out phones and look at things in the street and what have you. Whereas here, people are walking around with their phones, their headphones in. It's very sort of free society in that regard, safe. So just come and enjoy, just come and hang out. And it's a great country. It's a first world country. There's great healthcare system, air quality, water quality. I don't think the beaches are arguably as good as Brazilian beaches, but maybe in the north, I'm not sure. But
Probably northeast.
Northeast, exactly.
It's beautiful. Yeah,
that's Bahia, is that right?
Bahia, that side. Yeah.
So I've never been to your country, so I must go at some stage.
Oh yeah, you should
never
definitely
been,
go.
But
Yeah,
I've got some Brazilian friends who have said, when you go, like, tell me and we'll go together. So I'd love to go to your country at some stage in the future.
Yeah, and the Brazilian as Australia, it's a big land, right?
Yeah, totally.
We've got like, I think Brazil is the 5th and Australia is the 6th, something like that in land size.
Yeah.
But we do have anything you imagine. So, for example, in my state, there is snow in my state.
Wow.
And people don't know that. Like here, you go to the mountains here, it's snowing in Australia, right? And we've got the Northeast, which is beautiful. We got the Amazon, which is nice too. Where my parents live, which is Santa Catarina. To me, it's the most beautiful state in Brazil. And you have anything you want in Brazil, you can find. Yeah?
That's awesome. I've got some friends, Thais and Rodrigo, and they come from a state I can't remember, but they said it's like famous for like cowboys and horses and.
Guyana.
They come from Guyana. So, Thais, Rodrigo, I remember now. Thank you very much.
Sertanejo. Yeah.
But they're very good friends of mine, and they were in Australia for a long time, and they've got Australian citizenship, and they're now living back in Brazil with the aim of looking to come back again in the future. So, yeah, I've met a lot of amazing people from your country. Like authentically, I've got really good friends from Brazil. So it's whenever a Brazilian comes into class, you're going to have like an interesting sort of dynamic in there, which is cool. So yeah.
Yeah, and back to you. I also have a lot of Australian friends now,
cool.
And they are super nice people. Even I had games night. We have a crew, the games night
Amazing.
crew. So I'm probably gonna send this video to them. They welcome me, and they are really important to us, not just to me, to my wife, obviously, but it's awesome.
And just to that point, I mean, community is so important.
Yeah.
We had this chatting class the other day that, like, I rent. I haven't bought anything, and but I'm still very much part of my community. Like my neighbors, I know all my neighbors in my area. I've got a dog, so I take him out into the park opposite my house. And community is big. And there's one thing I would say that I understand why people don't necessarily speak the local language immediately, because they want to stay part of their community. But one thing to always remember is most of those people will go home. So if you are from Brazil and you come here to Australia and you make friends with a lot of Brazilians, hopefully those friendships survive long term, but also arguably a lot of those people will leave. And then that's just the nature of what happens.
Exactly.
So therefore, if that happens, what are you left with? So I would always say, try to transition, sort of bleed that love into the community, and just sort of meet people and do meetups, and sort of if you are an engineer or architect or from a different nurse, what have you, like try to meet up with those professionals, and never forget, like, you're exotic. And what I mean by that is, if I go to Brazil, I'm exotic. I'm Aussie, right? And that's actually an advantage of you guys being here, that you said, everyone say, hey, I'm from Brazil. And goes, oh, Brazil. Oh, my sister went there last year. And there's like a talking point immediately, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
I can't do that in Melbourne. I can't go, hey, I'm from
Melbourne.
They go, what do you want from me? Should I call the police?
Exactly. Good point.
So it's always you use that to your advantage.
Yeah. That's the biggest advice as well, because I always thought that being an immigrant here in Australia and coming here to learn English would be a disadvantage, but I think it's a strength.
Yeah, I think anybody different is always interesting to whoever's from anywhere. I mean, I'm a massive heavy metal fan, and this year I went to Europe for 5.5 weeks and saw a whole bunch of bands like Iron Maiden, Guns N' Roses, and AC/DC and what have you. And all you have to do is turn around in the audience and talk to people, and they're like, oh, you're from Australia? I'm like, God. And I had all these Germans turn around to me and or in Austria or something, I saw Iron Maiden in Austria, and just literally just started talking to a few people, and then just like 15 people around me talking, and like, who is this guy? Why are you here? And I'm like, well, we also travel.
One thing we were talking before on the background before we even started podcast was the definition of success, right? And I guess you have a really interesting idea about that.
Yeah, I think, as we said before, like, what's your intention? Like, why do you do anything? And I've seen a lot of people who will come, then they'll leave, or they'll come and they'll stay. So for me, one of the definitions of success is that you end up working in the same industry as you did in Brazil here. So if you're a practice manager, if you're an architecture practice manager, can you achieve that here? One of my old students, Magda, she is from Poland, and she ended up being practice manager of her architectural firm here in Melbourne. Another one of my friends, Asha, she's from Poland as well. She ended up, I didn't teach her, but she's one of my international friends. But she ended up being the site project manager for every Uniqlo store in Australia.
Ooh.
She was responsible for it because she did that sort of work back in Poland. So I think, there are no boundaries. If you're skilled, if you're credentialed, if you've got the know-how, you'll get the job. It's as simple as that. Other people, success, like I said, success means different things. So some people will get success by having a conversation in English.
Exactly, yeah.
That's success, right? And that's massive. I remember, spending a lot of time in Spain and having Spanish friends who couldn't speak English. But I was friends with them, and I'm like, I can't believe this, because I never thought that I could. I didn't think I was ever going to be able to speak a second language. But I started learning Spanish when I was, how old was I? 25. And then I went to live in, I went to spend a lot of time in Spain when I was 32. So, a lot of time, working those skills up. But when you're able to actually have a conversation in another language, that's a win. That's a massive thing, because then your world opens. Like you said before, if we were to meet in a hostel in Berlin, you and me, the Brazilian and the Aussie, but we're conversing in English.
Yeah.
Then we can go out, have drinks, go to a club in Berlin, and just hang out, and we can do it in my mother tongue, but you would be doing it, in my mother tongue, which would be a massive achievement. It's like me going and hanging out with you in São Paulo in Portuguese.
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
massive. Like that's a huge success there, right there.
Yeah.
It depends what your aim is. Obviously, that's what success is.
Yeah. But the feeling of having a conversation on your second language with a local, it's you can't put a price on that.
It's a different level, isn't it?
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
a satisfaction in being able to dialogue, engage and get meaning from that.
Yeah.
And then reply. So it's one thing listening and going, I understand, but then actually putting another layer on top is actually responding.
Exactly right.
Building conversation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome, man.
I really enjoyed the conversation. I'm probably going to have you again at some point next year.
Happy to.
Yeah, I know that's a lot of good stuff coming from your end as well.
Thanks, man. Yeah.
Good projects coming next year.
Yeah.
And I can't wait to hear about it.
Thanks very much.
Yeah.
Good to hang out.
Okay. Thanks, Adam.
Thanks, man.
That's